Welcome back to Impact Show. Sinan Kanatsiz, host of the world's greatest leadership show on YouTube. So I've been doing this for almost 12 years now. Interviewed several leaders across my network in tech, venture capital, creative, elected office. I'm really honored today to be at one of my favorite locations in the world, Laguna Beach. Alex Rounaghi, who I was introduced to by Mayor Joe Stapleton, is my guest today. Alex, can you tell our audience a little bit about your background?
Yeah, well, great to be here, and what a better location to start the day than Main Beach here in Laguna Beach. So yeah, I was born and raised in Laguna Beach, went through the public schools here, and then I went to the East Coast for college. I've always been interested in government, and when I was set to graduate from college in June of 2020, and as you know, the world changed in March of 2020, and that actually brought me back home to Laguna Beach. Otherwise, I'd probably be on the East Coast or something like that, or San Francisco or LA. And I got involved locally. I got involved on the city's housing committee, and it was actually a last-minute decision in August of 2022. That there was the filing deadline for city council, and it was extended because one of the incumbents didn't run again. Okay. And so literally the day before the deadline, I made the decision. I could be a part of the solution and help solve problems at the local level and run for city council, or not. Right. And I just decided to go for it, and I ended up getting the most votes and was elected. And last year, in 2024, I was the mayor pro tem, and then this year in 2025, I'm the mayor. And so The rest is history.
That's awesome. I mean, that's unprecedented. I've never heard of someone who has first job ever is to be an elected official, right?
Not my first job.
Okay, so you had a job before that.
I was working for Supervisor Foley at the County of Orange.
Okay.
So I started off as an intern in her office and was able to become a senior policy advisor. So I came in, when I was running for city council, I came in with experience of working at the high level of county government and like holding department heads accountable, looking at the budget, which is a $9 billion budget. So I came in with experience that was relevant to the position, but still it doesn't, in retrospect, it's crazy that people elected a 24-year-old.
So take me back to how you first got inspired by government. You said you were in college back in 2020, so COVID was going on.
Totally.
What was the precipice of an interest in government?
I think I've always had an interest in government. When I was in high school, I was a page for Senator Feinstein, so I got to go to work on the Senate floor and give them water, which was such a cool experience to see, history firsthand, right? The greatest deliberative body in the world. And I think, I was also involved in working in the Orange County juvenile justice and foster care system. So I've always been passionate about the idea that in America, you should, if you work hard, you should be able to live up to your potential.
Right.
I think that's like my family story. My dad's side of the family.
Right.
His family came from Iran, and so I really believe in that. And I think that especially at the local level, what I learned in working at the county was just what an impact local government has on all of our lives. And it's really not a matter of ideology oftentimes, but a matter of, the efficient deployment of resources, which in many ways makes it fulfilling because you can have an impact in a meaningful way.
Right. So tell me a little bit about the process of getting into elected office. And you said you were a page. A lot of people don't even know, when they're young, how do you get involved with government? And I think page is a really interesting job. Can you explain what that is? Because that's more on a federal level.
Yes.
For our audience, where someone who's watching might be a teenager that's interested in elected office, super young in their life.
Yep.
A lot of people, at least from my experience, will go do business, or they'll inherit a political career through a family or a generation, and then they'll go into elected office. Like when they're old, like my age, I'm 50, right? But you went in very early. And talk about that experience as being a page, because I think that's important for our audience.
Yeah, it's I thought that I would have no shot at becoming a Senate page, because there's only around 30 of them in the whole country, and there's actually a dormitory that you stay at in Washington, D.C. Yeah, okay. You're not allowed to have a phone. It's very you have to make your bed in the morning. It's very a lot of rules.
Right.
And so I don't know how it works now, because now our two senators are not very senior, they're relatively new. But so some states don't get a page because it depends on your seniority of your senator. So I don't know what it is right now, but you just apply through a senator's office. I wrote a letter to Senator Feinstein.
Right.
And I thought that I would just go to some donor or some some other politician's kid, and I just applied. I kept following up, and I got the one day they called and they said, Senator Feinstein's would like to sponsor you, and I thought it was a joke.
So you just wrote a letter. I mean, there was no inside relationship or no strategy, just a letter.
No, and I just kept following up, and I was intentional about figure out who the staff member was and how to follow up with them. So it was really just the good old-fashioned way of, which is what you do in every day.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
In most cases, what I found in life is that there's rarely like formal processes for getting a job.
Yeah.
It's usually about like reaching out to someone and showing like, oh, you need to sponsor someone for this opportunity. I'm the perfect, person.
And so there's only 30 positions in the entire country.
Yeah.
And he writes a letter, okay? So think about that for a second. The statistical odds of this are like 0.0001%, but he still got it by writing a letter. And I think that's so paramount. Sometimes I want to express something to somebody, and the best way is to actually take a pen and write a letter, because you could feel the emotion in the handwriting. And in the technology world, you can't feel the emotion so much. And I actually have a friend who wanted to be a member of Club 33 for many, many, many years.
Okay.
Club 33 at Disneyland is like next to impossible to get a membership in. And she actually wrote a letter to Disneyland Resort, and they selected her.
Wow.
And again, it goes back to writing a letter and taking that risk. Talk a little bit about how young you are. And I mean, respectfully, I say this. Does the city of Laguna Beach, do you have some people sometimes are like, are you serious? You're in your 20s. How can you be mayor and run this huge budget, this massive city? Can you talk a little bit about that and maybe how you overcame that?
Yeah, so it was funny. I mean, I haven't heard that recently since being mayor, because I'm 27, so maybe that's respectable now.
Right,
I don't know.
right.
But when I was 24 and I was running, it was funny because someone wrote in a letter to the editor basically saying, like his brain's not fully developed. And my response was, I mean, they weren't wrong. Your brain's not fully developed until you're 26. And
26,
so
okay.
The best is yet to come was sort of I didn't respond to that.
Right.
But ultimately, I think what I found, and people did make comments about that, but ultimately the voters made a decision. They knew how old I was.
Right.
And so that confidence of knowing that, like someone could be critical of me after I was elected saying I was too young, but ultimately that's the voters' decision to make. And the voters basically, they watched the debates, we have a highly educated electorate in Laguna Beach.
Right.
And so I think that they saw that I was someone who didn't have all the answers to every question, but what I brought to the table was a willingness to understand all sides of an issue, learn, do my homework, and then come to a decision that was, fair and in the best interest of the residents. Not agreeing with everyone, but I think that's ultimately what I was able to demonstrate, because really nobody knows all the answers, especially in government with all the issues that we deal with every day.
And how long is the term here in Laguna Beach as being a seated mayor?
Being mayor is a 1-year term, and then the council selects the mayor every year in December, and being on city council is a 4-year term.
Okay, got it. So can you talk a little bit about some of the priorities you have here? I mean, it's April 2025. It's a beautiful city, but obviously you've got crime, you have homelessness, you have renovations and infrastructure. Can you talk about your leadership and the things that are important to your constituents and region?
Yeah, so really what since being involved on city council, what I've really come to appreciate is that government can really only do a couple things, and very well. When the government tries to do everything, it gets difficult to actually, do the basics. So I see the three core competencies of local government as public safety, infrastructure, and the efficient delivery of services. So public safety, what we're doing is we're going all in on leveraging data and technology to deal with crime. We've actually been able to reduce crime for the 3rd year in a row based on the FBI crime statistics. And so we were just talking earlier about Flock, which is the camera system that we have, the automatic license plate readers.
Right. Yep.
We're looking at drone technology. The first vote I actually did on the city council was to approve a police contract that increased the wages, which allowed us to fill a lot of our vacancies because all the departments are competing with each other. And so to attract and retain the best and the brightest, you have to pay more. Fire safety is a big issue in Laguna Beach.
I can imagine
when I was running for city council, and it's still the answer that I always give, the question isn't if, but when the next wildfire happens. And that's really the approach that we've been taking. And I think what happened, the tragedy that we saw unfold in Los Angeles only reaffirmed that, but it really hasn't changed our direction because we were already doing that. We've put $25 million over the last 5 years into wildfire mitigation, looking at, we've undergrounded some utility lines. AI cameras are going to be a big part of that because I think detecting a wildfire early is key. Really underground utility lines, especially Laguna Canyon Road, that's going to be a priority moving forward because you look at all the data of how wildfires start, and they play a very significant role in addition to being a critical. We have 3 ways in and out of Laguna, right? And so if Laguna Canyon Road is shut down because of a utility pole that comes down, that's not good for anyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just remember, because being born and raised in Orange County in the 90s, I think the worst wildfire at the time in Orange County was in Laguna. Yeah.
And I think the state of California actually at the time in terms of property damage.
Right.
And we had 2 wildfires in 2022, both of which, the Emerald Fire and the the coastal fire, both of which could have been catastrophic had it not been, I mean, the coastal fire did burn homes in Laguna Beach,
Right.
but it could have been catastrophic for our city if winds had shifted in a different direction at different times. And so, luck's not a strategy when it comes to wildfires. So we have to go all in on that. And then infrastructure. I mean, infrastructure, we're a 100-year-old city. In 2 years, we're going to be celebrating our 100th year anniversary.
Wow.
Which, in many ways, and I spoke about this in my State of the City speech at the Montage, it demands reflection because you think about, like, how did we get here? How did we become such a cool, unique city? Like, there's nowhere else like Laguna Beach. But at the same time, 100 years that's a long time,
Yeah.
right? So we have infrastructure, we have a 100-year-old sewer system. We have, this year we're celebrating the 100th year, so actually 2 years before the incorporation of the city, of when we got water in Laguna Beach. Because,
Right.
we don't have groundwater under us in South Orange County. But so what we did is in 1925, a group of 5 guys they formed a duck hunting committee, and they went to Huntington Beach, and they pretended to be duck hunters. But what
Okay.
they were actually doing was buying land that would access the groundwater basin and be able to take that water and send it back to Laguna Beach, which was how we have our how we got our water supply. That water ultimately was, the ocean water breached that, so we lost our groundwater. So right now we're relying on 100% imported water, meaning our water comes from the Colorado River or the Northern California Water Project, which you don't want to be in a position where you're relying on outside sources for your water. So what we've done is we've negotiated a deal with, and I've worked closely with Joe Stapleton, the mayor of Newport Beach, on negotiating an MOU, and we've purchased land in Fountain Valley. And so, 100 years after forming the water district, what we're actually doing is we're going to go from 100% imported to 2/3 of our water supply coming locally through this well in Fountain Valley. So we're working closely with Newport on that. So it's going to be a big deal and save ratepayers $1 million a year.
Oh, that's awesome. And in the notes, I'm going to put the water distillery that's out there in Fountain Valley. It's one of the best in the nation, and you've got to see this plant. It's unbelievable. And the way that water moves in Orange County is nation leading. It's awesome. It's great to see that Newport Beach and Laguna Beach are working together around this issue. Speaking about infrastructure, obviously Laguna Beach is a tourism destination.
Yes.
In the summers, a lot of people like to come down and use your beaches.
Yeah.
How are you mitigating traffic flow, and what are some of the challenges you're trying to overcome there?
We have no problem with visitors coming to our beaches if we can avoid your cars, right? So we have peripheral parking on the outside of the city. I had a meeting actually with Mayor Agron and Irvine, and we talked about how can we collaborate with our transit system so that we don't have to have people bringing their cars into Laguna Beach.
Right.
The Coastal Commission says that we can't really do it. So in certain summer days, the residents feel very upset because they say, our beaches are overrun. And they're not wrong in saying that, but state law doesn't allow us to do anything about that. So the question is, how do we mitigate the impact of visitors so that we can keep what makes Laguna Beach so beautiful, right? And so we've been looking at how to increase our capacity in terms of park rangers, improving our enforcement mechanisms, and just ensuring that people still get the high quality services. And then our trolley system in the summer is great. We have an on-demand system, so it's basically like Uber. You can use an app and call a publicly provided Uber. You have to go to a stop that's close to your house. But that's a great system for residents, especially during the summer months, because it's hard to find parking.
Right.
So the idea of being able to take that is a great thing.
So for our audience, being that you're coming up to a 100-year-old city, what are the variables that make Laguna Beach Laguna Beach?
Yeah.
How do you preserve those variables?
Great question. So I had my State of the City speech, and in preparation for that, the theme of my remarks were about the history of Laguna Beach as we think about the last almost 100 years, and how do we look at the next 100 years, right? And so what I found is that we're a community that's been defined by innovators and entrepreneurs and artists who are willing to really think differently about the world. So the Festival of the Arts was formed basically in the aftermath of the Great Depression, and so artists weren't able to sell their artwork, so they formed that, and that's a great example of something that's really been going on and then the pageant of the Masters followed that. One of the and then right now, so the Irvine Bowl, which was given to us by the Irvine family, that actually the city owns it, but we have a lease agreement with the Festival of the Arts, and so one of the things I'm working on is how do we make the arts, a core part of our identity for the next 100 years? And so we're working on bringing live music to the Irvine Bowl, which happened in the past, but in recent years we have not been doing that. And so that's an exciting initiative. And then, artists are key to Laguna Beach. And I think the fact that we have that cultural legacy of artists who just think differently about the world and think outside of the box, that's really defined a lot of our, the entrepreneurialism when you think about, like Hobie Alter, and different surf brands that have, we're really a product of our artist culture in many respects, because that creative, part of our identity. And so What we're doing now is we're looking at how do we make sure, because as affordability becomes a huge issue, it's hard for artists to afford to live in Laguna Beach.
Right.
And you can't be an artist colony without artists.
Absolutely.
So what we've done is we've come with an agreement and working with our hotels we have a business improvement district where the hotels voluntarily give a percentage of their revenue to the arts, which also funds our visitors bureau. So we're going to reallocate some of that artist money or arts money for artists, so we can ensure that artists are always going to be part of our community.
That's awesome. So as we sort of round up this conversation, I wanted to get your perspective on politics.
Yeah.
Okay, which is never a fun topic. I've always been a center-right Republican, so I voted Republican, but I have friends that are Democrat. Being born and raised in Orange County, this region is mired with issues.
Yeah.
In order to get things done, it's like business. You have to have relationships. Can you talk a little bit about the fact that sometimes you have to work with Republicans to get things done? You're a Democrat,
Yeah.
I'm a Republican. We're getting things done by having this conversation. Why, in your perspective, do you feel this country is so divided when it comes to issues and working together, opposed to just saying, hey, we might be on different party lines, but we both feel the same way about an issue.
Yeah.
How can we work together to getting this resolved? Any perspective on that?
Yeah, so when we step back, I don't think the country is as divided as people think. I think the politicians divide the country, but I think on most issues, people really want the same thing. They want, public safety, they want good infrastructure, and then the third thing that I was going to mention was government efficiency.
Yeah.
Right now, it's interesting how that's become a partisan issue, but government efficiency is what at all levels of government, I think a lot of the reason why there's so much discontent in our country is because government has become incompetent and failed to deliver on the basics. And what that requires is us to really look at, we have so many rules that make, like in California, for example, there's a whole movement, the abundance movement. There's a book that's coming out by Ezra Klein that already came out. And it's like how long, the high-speed rail, it's a perfect example, right? The idea of that, I think, is a good idea, that you should be able to we should have world-class public transit in the state.
Yes.
There's no reason why we shouldn't have that. We put so much money into it. Why does it not get done? Because of all the regulations. That's a perfect example of why people are just so fed up and disillusioned with government. And then politicians, instead of solving problems like, getting basic things done, what they do is divide us.
Right.
They find issues that are, politically divisive, and they focus on those issues. So I guess I've found, like, I work at the local level when I'm working regionally on issues. I probably work with, just the same amount, if not more, Republicans than Democrats, and it's not because it's just because of convenience in terms of, Newport Beach or different, priorities. But I just think that we need to, as a country, move away from this whole idea of tribalism, of being on, one team or the other, and figure out how can we all come together, solve and find common ground on the issues that we agree, and still have respectful dialogue where we disagree.
Right.
Because disagreement, I find myself coming to a better conclusion when I have disagreement. Maybe I'm going to say, I still stand by what I was saying before, or I'll change my opinion. I think that makes it, in business, it makes us all better.
100%.
In government, it makes
compromise.
us better.
You got to compromise. Find something in the middle, as opposed to just holding onto your rock and being so, division oriented.
Yep.
But find a compromise in the middle. So a lot of folks that are watching this might have an interest in entering public life, and there's a whole next generation that's much younger than you. What advice do you have for them as far as facing adversity and overcoming any sort of negative influences that are saying, no, you're too young, or this isn't the right time?
Well, I just think you can never always do the homework when you want to get involved with something. So if you want to do an internship, always be prepared about, understanding the issues. A lot of people just think that you can say, I'm a young person, I should be involved in the process and provide that perspective. That usually people don't care about that. They care about what matters to them, which are the issues, and how. So I think just not letting age be an excuse to not understand the issues and not do your homework on the issues. Because really at the end of the day, that you cannot, it's just like in life, when you work hard on something, you're going to be prepared.
Right.
So don't let people, say that just because you're young, you're not able to be prepared. But at the same time, don't use that as an excuse for why you should be given, because no one ever deserves a seat at the table. You have to earn a seat at the table.
Yeah. In your hardest days, when you were aspiring to be a leader, like your hardest days, and you felt like giving up, and the lights were out, and you're just like, I'm going to shift gears. What kept you from staying on that lane and not going in another direction, like in your darkest, toughest times?
Well, the good thing about announcing for city council at the very last minute is it's a pretty short campaign.
Right.
So I had the momentum on, but I think what keeps me going, so I think what I get most frustrated about is just, and it kind of goes to the government inefficiency point, is sometimes I just feel like it's so hard to get anything done. That's what gets me most frustrated. And so what I think I'm inspired by is the fact that if if we can, is that like, is that most of the people agree with a lot of the things that I care about.
Right.
And so I feel like my goal is always to be the person like that. If I were a citizen, I would say, oh, that I really like what that elected official is doing. Like if random citizens were in some meeting with like, a water district or some government officials, that they'd be on the same side as what I was saying.
Right.
And oftentimes that's being against the status quo, right? Because the status quo often is just easy to do. It's just keep things the same. And so I think that's what keeps me motivated, is that residents is being on the side of issues where residents really care about and where it can have a meaningful impact on their lives. Like water is a perfect example. We don't think about water, but if you don't have water, then you have a problem.
Seriously, you take it for granted.
Exactly.
So with that, I present to you Mayor Rounaghi. And I first met Honorable Rounaghi at my own cocktail party at the inauguration when Trump was reelected in 2025. And actually getting sworn in, and Mayor Stapleton brought you over.
Yeah, we were at the mayor's conference.
Yes, exactly. So that was really awesome.
Yeah.
And I got to meet you, and I knew people always ask me like, how do you cast your show? Like, how do you know who to put on next? And I never know until I meet the person. So far, so good. I mean, we're nearing 100 episodes, and if you look back from the very beginning, everyone that's been on the show has really just done amazing things in their life and their career, and led by example. And I know that your future, Alex, is just getting started. You have our resources behind you. I'm excited to see how you evolve as a leader. I got my master's in organizational leadership at Chapman, and that's what inspired me to do this show from the beginning, is to find leaders that are diverse in all aspects, be it elected office, be it tech billionaire, be it venture capital, creative. It's not money that drives us. There's something different, right? It's inside all of us. And that's the common thread of this show, called Impact Show. And I'm also excited to announce that in Washington, D.C., October 5th through 8th, the IMA will be hosting its conference at the Hay Adams. We've actually sold it out already, and we're 6 months away. It's going to be an amazing fusion of leaders like Alex from Southern California to meet with local elected officials and local leaders in Washington, D.C. to talk about issues, policy, and how we can help this administration in a bipartisan way. So, Alex, tell me a little bit about where we're at right now and what this part of Laguna Beach means to you.
Yeah, so right now we're at the promenade, soon to be called the Forest, and essentially it was an example of during COVID, as everything shut down, this is what we had to do for the restaurants to be able to stay alive. But what we found is that it's a much better use of this space to be for the community and for pedestrians as opposed to cars.
Okay.
And so right now we actually are, the Planning Commission just approved a plan to make this permanent, because right now it's still temporary. As you can see, it still looks like a street.
Right.
So our goal is for this to look like, when it's done, that it never was a street in the first place, but instead is a place for the community. And I think it's really the future of, downtowns that are pedestrian focused, and really, because the days of like where you're just going to go and you're going to order on Amazon, right? You're not going to go and just pull up to pick up something like you might have done in the past. You still are, but what we're looking at is the future of our downtown and how we can be a place that's vibrant and exciting, and also a place where you can just run into community members.
Right. I mean, this is absolutely epic. I love it. And then you can have all the people walking around. You have the tenants that are going to enjoy this. This is fantastic. Tell me a little bit about occupancy and housing and how you're working around some of those issues.
Yeah, so what we're looking at in our downtown area is we just got an ordinance to the Coastal Commission where in our commercial zone, which is all along Coast Highway, right now you can do second floor office space, but you're not allowed to do second floor housing. We changed that, so you're going to be able to do second floor housing, which are going to be smaller, naturally more affordable units. And that's a big deal that I was able to get through the Coastal Commission, so we're excited about that. And occupancy is a big deal. We have a very high vacancy rate right now in Laguna Beach. We're around 8.3%, where our neighbors at Dana Point, Newport, they're 2 to 3 times less than that, right? So clearly there's something going wrong here in Laguna Beach, and what it is our process.
Okay.
It can take, my friend Zach Cornwell, he opened a sandwich shop called Wiggs.
Yeah.
It was a 3-year process to get through the city, because he had to have 27 parking spaces. He was converting a wig store to a sandwich shop. And if you look at the lot, you can't fit 27 parking spaces there.
No.
Our codes are outdated,
and
you have these discretionary processes that work if you're a sophisticated, big multinational company. But if you're a small business trying to open up, you're not going to deal with that kind of risk and lack of predictability.
Right.
So it really goes back to the need to streamline our regulations, and that's how we're going to make it where entrepreneurs want to come to Laguna Beach.
We talked a little bit about regulations.
Yeah.
My friend who owns a nuclear company, you talked about trains, rail. What could the country do to get their regulation act together, because it seems to be prohibiting our country's position strategically.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just some common sense things that are always being held back because of regulation. What, in your opinion, being so young, do you think mayors like you and elected officials can do to speed regulation common sense?
Yeah, so I think it's important to recognize that there are a lot of regulations that are important, right? Like, we want clean air, we want clean water, we want all that. But what happens, I think, is that the people in the bureaucracy and, by default, the elected officials don't put enough pressure on the regulators to actually understand who they're regulating and how to achieve the goals. So, for example, housing in California, my day job is in real estate development. And you can see firsthand how there's all these rules that exist, and some of them make sense, but a lot of them just add time. And as you know, time is money, right? And so it just drives up the cost for everyone else, and makes it so you might say that it's not good for developers, but ultimately it's not good for the people of California who are trying to rent or buy a home.
Right.
And that's the byproduct of regulation. So I think just making sure that all regulations are thoughtful, and also that we look back on them. We don't just say, oh, we passed that 30 years ago and assume that fits the circumstances of today.
Right. Well, thank you so much for that. And we're standing in a very special place to me. As I was telling the mayor, I was born and raised in Orange County, and my parents used to come all the way to Laguna Beach from the city of Orange, and this was a big thing for us. We didn't have a lot of money growing up, and coming to Laguna Beach was very special because of the arts aspect. My mom was an artist, and we would always come to the Martin Lawrence galleries here to look at the Yamagata paintings, and it's just a very special place. So thanks again for this interview.
Yeah, thank you. Cool. Thanks for being here.